Well, it's been exactly a week to the day that I began performing a lot of the maintenance tasks on this truck to get it in really good shape after I bought it on September 10th. And so far I've changed the engine oil, the spark plugs, and distributor cap and rotor. And this past Thursday I spent some time taking the IP apart slightly to diagnose a sticky ignition switch concern, as well as smoke coming from between the steering wheel column cover and the instrument cluster bezel. And I've determined what the problem actually is. It's a bad circuit board in the speedometer, and the problem with the ignition switch is going to be in the actuator rod mechanism in the steering column, and both issues are going to be saved for a rainy day at a later date. So now but the truck is running really good, it's drivable, everything's functional, it's all put back together. And I actually cleaned everything, took the glass off the instrument cluster and cleaned that real good so it looks like new. But today I want to focus on the next phase of changing out the fluids and working my way back. I'm going to be changing the transmission fluid today and take you guys on that process. This is a 4x4, four-wheel drive, and that means it's got a transfer case. So I've already driven the truck a little bit to warm everything up, which is what you want to do when you change the fluids, make sure everything's nice and warm. And on the back of the extension housing on the transmission is the actual transfer case, which transfers power in the typical fashion to the rear wheels with a drive shaft, but also has a drive shaft on the other side of this that powers the front wheels when you want to go to 4x4 mode. So this is a Borg-Warner transfer case. Nice unit, and haven't seen any problems with it thus far, but there's a part number for it. But I want to go ahead and change the fluid anyway. Not a lot of people change the fluid in the transfer case because it's not really used all that much. So to get started, what you have here are two bolts that are 1/4 inch drive. This first bolt is your fill plug, and this bottom bolt is the drain plug. And it's basically just like a manual transmission or draining fluid in a manual transmission. I've got a catch can under here to catch all the oil. And I've already loosened up both of these plugs and taken a sample of the oil, just like I sampled the engine oil last weekend. That's why they're a little bit wet around here. So what we'll do now is take out the fill plug. And you might get a little weepage out of here. It might be kind of full. And what that's going to do is allow air to get in and help it drain that much better. Otherwise, when this fluid drains out of here, it'll kind of create a vacuum and take a much longer time to drain. So you just loosen out this other bolt, or plug I should say, and it may come out pretty quick, I'm not sure, so you want to kind of control it a little bit. Yeah, it's coming out pretty quick, so I'm going to use that plug as somewhat of a valve and control the flow. I've done these before on my '89 F-150, and it was under so much force, it came out so good that it hit me in the face. I think I can get away with taking the plug out now. Changing transmission fluid is always a very messy job. Transfer case isn't so bad, but when I move up to the transmission, you'll see just exactly why it's as messy as it is. So that's basically all there is to draining it. Now what I have to do is go ahead and let that drain real good, put the bottom plug back in, and add new fluid in the fill plug. So I'll be right back to show that. One more thing about the transfer case is while you've got these plugs out, if you've got a small light like this, this is a really good opportunity to get up in here and inspect. And you can see the drive chain. You can see how this works. Basically, it has a chain that goes from the output shaft for the transmission and just reverses the rotation to the front wheels. And then you've also got a little filter right there, built-in filter inside. So it's a really good opportunity to look up in here and kind of get a feel for if that filter is blocked, or how much sludge buildup or contamination you have built up inside the transfer case. And it's looking really clean. Of course, the oil analysis will be the final determination quantitatively, but just looking at this initially qualitatively, we've got a transfer case that's in really good shape. You can also look in the fill hole, the same thing. Check the cleanliness of the components and everything, and they look really good. So now it's time to go ahead and put the drain plug back in and fill it up. Okay, to fill this up, you use a standard hand pump that you would find at a automotive store. The transmission fluid I use comes in a bottle with a neck that's a little bit too big, so that the pump won't screw all the way down. But it's basically just like filling up a differential. And after you purge the line with new fluid into the container, you just go ahead and work the hand pump like that and force your fluid in there. And it doesn't really matter how much the capacity is, because what you want to do is keep doing this until you start to see a little bit of fluid dribble out of the fill hole. And as soon as you do, you just go ahead and stop and put the plug in. So I'm going to continue doing this. Not sure how long it's going to take or how many quarts it's going to take, but I'll put the plug back in and we'll move on to the transmission itself. Okay, now that I've completed the fill process, here's how you guys can tell if you've got just the right amount of fluid in here. You should be able to take out the drain plug, and this is also the procedure you can use to check your fluid level in your transfer case or differential to see if you've got the right level without even changing it. But I should be able to take this plug out just a little bit and see if I see fluid starting to weep out. And I do. So I know I can't add any more fluid in there. So this transfer case is full. I'm going to go ahead and tighten the plug down, and I'll go ahead and drive it around after I change the main transmission fluid, and then wait for it to cool down, and then check this level one more time, because the fluid level actually it'll expand and cause the level to rise. And on a cold day, I might be able to get just a little bit more fluid in there to get that exactly right. So let me tighten that down, and we'll move on to the automatic transmission. Okay, now that the transfer case is all drained and filled, I'm moving on to the automatic transmission, and I'm focusing on the bell housing here, which has the torque converter inside. And I'm going on the hunch or assumption that I'm going to find a torque converter drain plug in here, so I can drain the converter before I drop the pan and change that fluid and filter inside there. So I'm going to pull this plug out. I've already got it started. And we'll play Wheel of Fortune here, because 360 degrees of crankshaft rotation. I got a 1 in 360% chance of finding the plug. And of course the plug is not visible, so I'm going to have to, as usual, I'll put a socket on the front, on the crankshaft vibration damper bolt, and roll the engine over with it until I can line up the torque converter drain plug, and then I'll go ahead and start draining that. Take a sample first. It's actually kind of hot. And then lastly we'll drop the pan and drain the remaining fluid. So let me try to find that bolt or plug, and I'll be right back. Okay, so by using a 15/16 long socket, actually an air wrench socket and an extension bar, or breaker bar, I was able to roll the engine over into exactly the right position to expose the torque converter drain plug, and I'm lucky that this truck does have one. So I'll show you what that looks like. And there it is right there. And it's leaking oil because I went ahead and tried to loosen it to get a sample, but the fluid's much too hot. So I'm going to go ahead and take that bolt and let the torque converter drain, and I'll see if I can collect a sample in the process. Fluid's really hot. So now it's draining out and taking any contaminants with it. I can go in with my sample jar, fill that up. Now that's done, and that's going to take a while to drain. But I'm not a big fan of the transmission flushes that people do, like with the machines. It doesn't get into the pan at all, doesn't let you see any kind of debris in the pan or change the filter. Nobody drains the converters anymore, and most of your fluid's actually in the converter. The converter is what generates most of your heat. And as you can see, there's a lot of fluid in there. And it doesn't look bad, but it doesn't look good either. I got some on my hand, and if I smell my hand, it smells a little bit burned and old. But the analysis will tell me exactly what kind of shape the transmission's in, just like it'll tell me what kind of shape the engine's in. So I'll let that drain and put the plug back, and we'll move on to dropping the pan. Okay, now that the torque converter is completely drained and the drain plug reinstalled and the protective rubber cover reinstalled, the next thing I need to do is drop this transmission pan. And like most vehicles, there's no drain plug on the pan, so that makes this the messiest part of the job. But there are some things that I can try to do to minimize the spillage. For one thing, this huge transmission is so big that it's bigger than my pan by a little bit. So what I'll end up doing is completely remove the bolts toward the end, and then leave some of the other bolts in here but loose to allow the drain pan to tilt slightly but not fall off, and control the amount of fluid draining out until it drains to somewhere below the surface here, below the gasket. And then once that's done, I can go ahead and drop the pan from the vehicle completely and go ahead and inspect it. And there's a lot of bolts on these things, so let me go ahead and get started and see what we end up with. Hopefully I won't end up with a huge puddle under the car, but it's happened before. There's kind of no way to avoid making a mess, but we'll see how it goes. Okay, now that I've gotten some of the bolts removed completely toward the back and some of them loose toward the front, you can already see the beginning stages of impending doom. Hopefully it's not going to drain out too much. I'm going to start loosening this bolt here, and you can see the pan start to tilt down just a little bit. Try to break this seal here. And I'm just going to keep on loosening. And I don't know if this fluid's been changed or not. This is a cork gasket. I don't know if Ford used cork originally, so this may have been changed at least once before. But this has already dropped down just a little bit. And some of the fluid's come out. So I'm going to carry on and see how much more I can get and get below this surface here so I can go ahead and pull it from under the vehicle. Okay, I've got all the bolts removed toward the rear of the pan and along the sides on both sides, except for some of the few remaining toward the front. And I keep these videos real. I don't really have time to edit them, so what you see is what you get. You're going to see what this pan looks like inside at the same time I do once I get it off, but I'm trying to show you the a little bit of the technique to use to sort of minimize the mess. And now what we want to do is remove this last bolt on the end and let some of that fluid drain on out, controlling the pan at the same time and moving your catch can too. Everything's still kind of hot, so it's coming out fast. You don't want to let the pan rest on the bolts on the front because you'll bend the flange. The fluid in the pan actually makes it a little bit heavy. And you can kind of move the pan a little bit to get an oscillation going. Try to get as much of that fluid out of there as you can, just to minimize the weight and the potential for a mess. And that's pretty much about all it's going to give me right there. So now what we'll do is we'll go back up with it, move the drain pan away for clearance, and now we're going to remove the remaining bolts toward the front. They're just not held in there real tight. Just enough to control things. And now we're going to go ahead and lower the pan from the vehicle for the very first time. Trying to control it to make sure that you don't get a bunch of fluid in your face. And we'll set this on the ground carefully so I can get out from under the trunk, and we'll get a much better look at what's going on inside there. While I still have the camera positioned well, we can see what the transmission looks like inside. We can get a look at the valve body area. For the very first time, this may indeed be the first time that the transmission fluid has been changed in this manner. I'm just not sure if Ford went to using quart gaskets or not, but so far everything looks really clean. You just want to do a visual inspection of everything under there. What you're looking at now is the valve body. This is the Ford E40D 4x4 transmission. It's really a modified C6. There's not much to see yet because I have to get the filter out of there, but so far everything's looking really clean. That's encouraging, especially given the age of the fluid. There's your shift lever. I'm going to reposition this pan to catch more of the drippings. And now we'll see what's inside the oil pan. That doesn't look too bad at all. That actually looks really, really good. I've seen so much worse. So much worse than that. Let me get a clean paper towel. Do sort of a crude white glove test. There's not a lot of sludge in there at all. Hardly any sludge. This transmission fluid's either been changed, which doesn't smell like it has, or the, I don't know if you can see in there, the heavy-duty oil cooler right there did its job. Part of the towing package kept the transmission nice and cool. I don't know if I'll ever know if the fluid's been changed or not. I don't think Ford uses these quart gaskets, so I'm tending to think it's been changed at least once. Let's see if this thing has a pan magnet. So far it doesn't have one. It might be under the area here. Let me go ahead and get the rest of the fluid drained out. And we'll get a closer look at this pan, but so far I'm liking what I'm seeing. I'm glad I was able to get in here and do this. There's nothing like knowing what kind of shape your equipment's in versus just guessing. Okay, now that I got the gasket pulled off to make sure that we don't have more of a mess than we need, let's go ahead on over and drain this fluid out of here and see what we got. Ah, we do have a pan magnet. It was just hiding from me. Get out here in the sunlight, we can see what's going on in here. So there's that pan dropped for the very first time. Very, very clean. I'm really happy with this. A little bit of sludge, just normal. There's the pan magnet, and just a normal amount of debris, really. I see some iron filings, but the magnet did its job. That's a normal amount of buildup, actually. And that the buildup on there tells me that the fluid probably has not been changed due to the level of contamination on this magnet. They would have cleaned that up. It wouldn't look this bad. 17 years old and 150,000 miles. That's not a lot of sludge buildup at all. That's very encouraging. We'll know more about the condition of this transmission by the fluid analysis, but I would expect the fluid to come back fairly clean of particulates, and we'll probably have a little bit higher oxidation numbers and maybe have a little bit of a higher TAN number, total acid number, because of the age of the fluid. But this is a good reason. This is one of the reasons why I just don't like the transmission flush procedures. A lot of the people don't know how to use the equipment properly. They'll use harsh chemicals which might break up some of this contamination here off the magnet and kind of defeating the purpose of the magnet, and you just don't want this kind of material injected back into the transmission again. That's what this magnet's for, is to keep that stuff out of there. And when you run a high pressure flush through here with caustic chemicals and everything, you're just loosening all that stuff up and making it flow all around that delicate valve body. It's just not a good idea. It's just better to go ahead and do the job properly. Drop the pan, drain the converter if you can, clean everything up, and give everything a good inspection, and go back in with a high quality synthetic fluid preferably. Let me get that magnet out of there, clean everything up, take off the filter, and see more about what that valve body looks like. Just wanted to give you guys a close-up of what this magnet looks like. You can see a little bit of the ferrous material attached to it. Part of clutch material and maybe a little bit of the gears inside. Kind of forming nucleation sites for sludge buildup. That's kind of what sludge is. This is a kind of gunk in your transmission that would not be removed with a transmission flush. When the magnet gets like this, it kind of loses some of its strength and becomes less effective. Which is why it's important to go ahead and clean this up as best you can. So I'll go ahead and do that and be right back. Okay, now to get the filter out of here, it's actually pretty simple. It's just a press fit. And what you kind of want to do is rotate it a little bit like this and kind of pull downward till it clears. There may be fluid left in here, so we'll go ahead and drain that out. Don't know if you guys can see that. Just trying to minimize the mess. And now we'll go ahead and invert this, remove it from the vehicle, and give it a quick inspection. So we'll walk over to our catch can with it and make sure that everything's draining out. This process takes a while to do a transmission properly, but it's definitely well worth it. I hope you guys can see. Go upside down, get in the light. Get back over here where it... Yeah, you guys can see that Dacron filter in there. I don't see any chunks of metal or anything like that. That's definitely very encouraging. I'll go ahead and set that aside and look at that date code right there. That date code is 1994. The truck was made in October 1994. As we can see on the label there, that tells me that nobody's been in this transmission, and I'm kind of surprised that Ford used quart gaskets, but I guess they did. That's the original transmission filter in this vehicle. 150,000 miles and 17 years old. And now we can get a really good look at the underside of this transmission. Looking at the valve body very closely. Everything's just really clean. Always good to inspect things like this. If you see any kind of debris or anything like that, now's the opportunity to remove that. Over there under that black plate is your solenoid actuated valves. This is an electronic transmission, that's why it's called the E40D. When the solenoid's engaged, it controls a hydraulic valve in this valve body and changes your gears, or locks up the converter, or goes into overdrive. So that's very encouraging. I'm liking what I'm seeing so far. So now we'll come back over here and begin the process to put everything back together. I've got the pan cleaned up, and whenever you're working on a transmission, you just want to be extraordinarily clean, very clean. You want to be able to eat off that pan and eat off all the components, because it's a closed system. There's the tolerances inside the transmission have the tightest tolerances of any component on the vehicle, and the slightest bit of debris can cause drivability concerns. So let me scrape off a little bit more of the gasket material and clean this up even more. I got the magnet already cleaned up in the garage here, set aside. That's what the magnet's supposed to look like when it's clean. So I'll get that pan cleaned up and put the magnet in and begin to put this thing back together. Okay, I got the new filter installed. We're looking at the old filter, and one of the things you want to look out for when putting the new filter in, the filter just basically is a press fit up inside the valve body, and it's got these indentations here for the bolts that hold the valve body together. You just want to make sure that this filter is lined up with those bolts and fits up in there snug, and you also want to make sure that this gasket sealing material here does not remain inside the valve body, that you go ahead and pull it out and make sure you get rid of that, otherwise the new filter is not going to go in. And then over here we have the transmission pan inside the garage, where it's nice and protected from debris flying around in the air getting in it. I've got it completely clean and spotless, which is what it has to be when working on a transmission. This area here is just where the filter was making contact with the galvanized material and rubbing a little worn spot there. Got the magnet all cleaned up and everything as well. So this is the rags. These are the 2 paper towels I use to clean up that magnet, and that's what the sludge look like, and that's what you do not want circulating around in your transmission, which may end up happening with a flush procedure, with a flush machine. So always remember, don't flush, drain. And this is the filter that I chose, the replacement filter that I chose, and that's a good filter because it has this nice synthetic gasket here instead of the cork material. Although the cork did pretty good, I kind of like this material a little bit better because it tends not to disintegrate when you go ahead and remove it, and it's also reusable. It tends to hold torque a little bit better as well too when you're tightening down your drain pan bolts or your transmission pan bolts. But let me go ahead and get this installed back in the vehicle. Installation is just reverse over removal, and we'll go on to the next part of the job. Okay, this transmission's coming right along. Got the transmission pan all bolted back up like it should be, and the nice rubber gasket installed, and all the bolts and fasteners are tightened down to specifications. And now there's one more part of the job that I like to do, and that's to wash the transmission coolers. Like most cars, this truck has a transmission cooler built into the radiator, but because it has the towing package, it's also got an auxiliary transmission cooler, which you can't see. Yeah, it's right here. And because of these 2 coolers, that they can contain a lot of oil, a lot of the old oil that I don't want to get into the system. So what I did was I've removed the supply line from the transmission to the radiator cooler, and under the truck at the transmission housing, I've removed the return line and plumb that into a catch container, and what I'm going to do is force some compressed air through here and just flush as much of that fluid out of here as possible. So let me go ahead and do that, and we'll see how much old fluid gets in that container. Okay, after all the coolers were flushed, that's how much old dirty fluid remained in those coolers, probably about maybe half a quart. So that was definitely worth doing. The only thing I couldn't flush out was the supply line, but that's okay. It was just too high up on the transmission to get to. There's not a lot of fluid trapped in the lines, but there is in the two coolers. So I'm glad I got rid of that extra bit of fluid. Got the lines all put back together. And one thing about these lines like this, you want to use these special wrenches that basically have contact surfaces on all sides except one, so you can get it on the line. You don't want to use a standard open end wrench because you'll round off the heads on the fastener. So now all that's left to do, the job is basically finished. All I've got to do now is add some more transmission fluid. And this big heavy-duty transmission takes about 4 gallons, so I'm going to put about maybe 3.5 to 3 3/4 gallons in there, and start the engine up and top off as necessary. And that'll basically finish the job. I hope this helps you guys out. It's definitely important to change your transmission fluid, as you've seen in this video. You've seen how dirty it was, and when I add the fluid in there, I'm just going to basically fill it up till it reaches the full mark on the dipstick. Nothing special about that, so there's no point in videoing it, but just want to go over the general process of what you would do to change the transmission fluid, not only in a truck like this, but basically any car that hopefully has a torque converter drain plug. And it's not that hard of a job. There wasn't a whole lot. There's a few drips over there, but I managed to get the pan dropped and not have a whole lot of fluid spill out everywhere, so that's good. But definitely worth doing yourself. It's not recommended to use the transmission flush procedures that a lot of the shops use and even the dealers use. You just want to drain the transmission, see what you got inside, and flush everything out and go in there with new fluid. So let me add in that new fluid and see how she drives. I hope this video helps you guys out wrenching on your trucks.